It's hard to build a fortress when the roof is leaking, and right now Europe's roof is leaking badly. For decades, Europe outsourced its security to America. Now, America is checking out. The wake-up call hasn't come from a battlefield, it's come from Washington. When Donald Trump returned to power, the old transatlantic consensus began to look more like wishful thinking. His administration wasted no time in letting Europe know that the US was tired of playing global babysitter. J.D. Vance, now one of the most prominent Republican voices on foreign policy, summed it up bluntly. Europe is rich, it has the population, it has the resources. It just doesn't want to spend the money. If Russia's a problem, Europe should handle it. Ukraine has paid the price. US aid has slowed, congressional support has fractured, and the once constant flow of weapons and intelligence has been disrupted. Zelensky, who only months ago was being hailed in Western capitals as the face of resistance, now finds himself shuttling from one European city to another, hat in hand, asking for help that's no longer guaranteed. The photos are dignified, the message is humiliating, and underneath it all lies the existential question. What happens to NATO if the United States no longer sees value in it? Trump has called the alliance obsolete. Others on his team have floated the idea of conditional defence. If a country doesn't spend 2% of GDP on defence, maybe Article 5 shouldn't apply. That's not just political theatre. It strikes at the core of what has kept Europe safe since 1949. So the message is clear. If Europe wants security, it's going to have to provide more of it itself. And surprisingly, Europe seems to have gotten the memo. For the first time in decades, European leaders are speaking the language of power, not just principles. Emmanuel Macron, once mocked for warning that NATO was experiencing brain death, is now calling for strategic autonomy. Olaf Scholz, not exactly a firebrand, declared a Zeitenwende, a turning point, in German security policy. Germany, after years of dragging its feet, has pledged to rebuild its military with a €100 billion special fund. And following Scholz, newly elected Chancellor Friedrich Merz has doubled down on this shift. A long-time advocate for Atlanticism, Merz has argued that Germany must become Europe's backbone in defence, pushing for increased defence spending and faster procurement reform. He's also called for a more assertive stance on European borders and a reassessment of energy ties with adversarial regimes, a sharp contrast to the strategic complacency of past decades. Other countries are following suit. Poland is ramping up its defence spending to more than 4% of GDP, higher than any NATO member except the US. Even Sweden and Finland, long neutral, have joined the alliance. There's a new seriousness in the air, a sense that the era of wait and see is over. This time it might actually be real. Of course, we've heard this tune before. During the Yugoslav wars in the 1990s, European leaders promised a fortress Europe, capable of managing its own crises. It ended with American planes bombing Serb positions while Europe drafted press releases. But now, with US backing less reliable and the threat more immediate, there's reason to believe the shift isn't just rhetorical. And yet, Europe has a way of proving itself its own worst enemy. If you want a case study in why this new militarized Europe still feels like a work in progress, look no further than Serbia. Serbia has positioned itself as Moscow's loudest ally in Europe. It refused to sanction Russia after the invasion of Ukraine. Its media, much of it state-controlled, parrots Kremlin talking points. And its president, Aleksandar Vučić, regularly plays both sides, promising EU integration on one hand while cozying up to Putin on the other. Serbia has destabilized Bosnia through its support for secessionist leaders in Republika Srpska. It's actively undermined Kosovo, most recently with a military operation involving armed Serb paramilitaries. And just this month, Vučić hinted he'd be honoured to attend Russia's Victory Day parade in Moscow, an event celebrating a war that's being fought today in Ukraine, not just remembered in history. Europe, in response, has issued statements. Some aid has been questioned, but mostly Serbia continues to be one of the largest recipients of EU funding in the Western Balkans. Yes, The same country that defies EU foreign policy, attacks its neighbours, and lionises Putin is still getting money from Brussels. It doesn't end there. In the latest Serbian government reshuffle, new ministers were appointed with openly anti-European views. One of them, Boris Bratina, a member of the far right, was filmed shouting, "Serbia and Russia. We don't need the European Union," at a Belgrade rally in 2009, where he also burned the EU flag. This is who's representing a potential EU accession country, while Serbia officially maintains that joining the European Union, its biggest investor, remains its strategic goal. Serbia's relationship with Russia was recently reaffirmed on a visit to Moscow by the Serbian patriarch, who said, "I need to tell you, so that you know, and you already know, but I need to say again that the Serbian people look at the Russian people as one. Sometimes it may be that the Serbs have great hope. Hope depends more on Russia, Russian politics than on Serbian politics. Maybe it is a paradox. Then if we look at history, the Serbian people and the Serbian church have never betrayed Russia. Some Slavic nations, I won't name them, under the influence of powerful Western militarist forces, changed their orientation for a time, later repented, but still changed. The Serbs never did. This love for Russia is, one might say, embedded even in the genetic makeup of the Serbian people. Public opinion in Serbia reflects this ambivalence. A 2024 poll found that only 40% of Serbians would vote in favour of joining the EU, while 34% would vote against it. This stands in stark contrast to the rest of the Western Balkans, where support for EU membership remains above 70% in countries like Albania, Kosovo, Montenegro, and North Macedonia. And yet Europe keeps negotiating, keeps funding, keeps insisting that Serbia can be brought along. This is the old model. Assume everyone can be persuaded, that every conflict has a middle ground, that time and money will eventually wear down even the most hostile regimes. It's diplomacy as a belief system. But belief systems don't stop tanks. So when European leaders now talk about Fortress Europe, about deterrence and sovereignty, and rebuilding their armed forces, it's worth asking, do they mean it? Or is this just the same cycle, dressed up in firmer language? Because if Europe can't hold the line against a 5 million person country trying to destabilize its neighbours, how is it going to face down a resurgent Russia? Real military power isn't just about budgets or fighter jets. It's about seriousness, about understanding what threats look like and being willing to respond with something more than disapproval. Europe is beginning to move in that direction, but the road is long and the clock is ticking. And the question remains, can a continent that forgot how to fight really become a fortress?